Two people, same city, same decade, same general income range. 20 years later, one has built genuine financial independence. The other is still living paycheck to paycheck, working just as hard, wondering where the gap came from. What created that gap? This is one of the most studied questions in personal finance. And the answer, consistent across decades of research, is not what most people expect. It was not a difference in intelligence. It was not a difference in luck, though luck played a role for some. It was not even primarily a difference in income, because the research consistently shows that income level alone is a surprisingly weak predictor of long-term wealth accumulation. The gap was almost always created by a difference in thinking. Specifically, by 8 fundamental differences in how these two types of people mentally frame money, how they think about income, spending, time, risk, opportunity, identity, debt, and value. These mental frameworks are not innate. They are not inherited. They are not determined by education level, background, or circumstances. They are learnable, adoptable patterns of thought that anyone can deliberately develop, and that once developed, change the financial decisions a person makes so consistently and so fundamentally that the accumulated effect over years and decades is genuinely transformative. I want to be direct about what this video is and is not. It is not a motivational speech about believing in yourself. It is not a law of attraction promise that thinking wealthy thoughts produces wealthy outcomes without action. What it is specifically is an examination of 8 concrete, practical, well-documented differences in how people who build wealth think about financial decisions compared to those who do not. Each shift is specific. Each one changes specific types of decisions in specific ways. And each one is something you can begin applying to your own thinking today. As we go through all 8, I want you to do something honest and uncomfortable. For each shift, ask yourself which side of the contrast you are actually on, not which side you aspire to be on, not which side you think you should be on, but which side genuinely describes how you currently think and behave around money. Because the gap between where you are and where you need to be is only visible if you see it clearly. And seeing it clearly is the beginning of closing it. 8 shifts, each one a direct contrast between a thinking pattern that builds wealth and one that works against it. Let us go through every single one right now. Why thinking determines outcomes before we go through the 8 shifts. Let me explain why thinking patterns matter so much. Because the connection between how you think about money and what actually happens to your money is not a motivational concept. It is a mechanical one. Every financial outcome in your life is the result of a financial decision. Every financial decision is the product of a mental framework, a set of assumptions, values, and habitual patterns of evaluation that determine what options you consider, what trade-offs you are willing to make, what feels like an acceptable financial choice, and what does not. Change the framework, and you change the decisions. Change the decisions, and given sufficient time, you change the outcomes. The 8 mental frameworks we are about to explore are not equally important or equally common. Some affect the vast majority of financial decisions a person makes. Some affect only specific high-stakes decisions. But all 8 have been consistently identified in research on wealth accumulation as meaningful differentiators between people who build financial independence and those who do not as the whole story, but as significant contributors to it. One important framing before we begin. These are not 8 things wrong with how poor people think versus how rich people think. That framing is both inaccurate and unhelpful. These are 8 specific thinking patterns, each one available to anyone, that, when adopted and applied consistently, tend to produce better financial decisions over time. The goal is not to judge where you are starting from. The goal is to show you exactly where to go. From monthly payment thinking to total cost thinking, to shift 1. The most expensive mental habit in personal finance, the most financially damaging thought pattern most people carry is one they do not even recognize as a thought pattern. It is so embedded in how they evaluate financial decisions that it feels like basic common sense. And it costs them more money than almost any other cognitive habit. It is monthly payment thinking, evaluating the affordability and desirability of a financial commitment based on its monthly cost rather than its total cost. And it is precisely the mental framework that the entire consumer credit industry is designed to exploit. When someone asks themselves, "Can I afford this?" what they almost always mean is, "Can I afford the monthly payment? Can I fit this number into my monthly budget? Does this monthly amount feel manageable given my current income?" And if the answer is yes, if the monthly payment fits, the purchase feels financially responsible. Even when the total cost extended over the full term of the commitment is significantly higher than the purchase price appeared to justify. A car financed over 5 years at a relatively modest monthly payment may cost tens of thousands of dollars more in total, including interest, than the sticker price suggested. A credit card balance paid on minimum payments may end up costing more in total interest than the original purchases were worth. A mobile phone contract spread over 24 months feels affordable per month and expensive in total, but almost nobody calculates the total before signing. Wealthy people who have developed the habit of total cost thinking, evaluate financial commitments very differently. Before any significant purchase or financial commitment, they calculate the total cost, not just the ticket price. The full financial obligation, including all interest, all fees, all ongoing costs, and all ancillary expenses associated with the commitment. And they evaluate that total number against what it represents in terms of hours worked. Investment returns foregone and financial goals delayed. Think about two people evaluating the same car purchase. Both earn the same income, both looking at a vehicle with a sticker price of $30,000 financed over 6 years. The first person, a monthly payment thinker, calculates the monthly payment, determines it fits in their budget, and signs. Over 6 years, including interest, they pay approximately $36,000 for a vehicle that is now worth significantly less than that. The second person, a total cost thinker, calculates the total obligation, compares it to what $36,000 invested over 6 years would produce, considers whether a vehicle at that total cost is the best use of that capital, and makes a deliberate decision from that full perspective. They may still buy the car, but the decision is made from complete information rather than from a monthly number that obscured the true cost. The shift from monthly payment thinking to total cost thinking is one of the single most impactful cognitive changes available in personal finance, because it applies to every significant financial commitment. It reveals costs that monthly payment framing specifically conceals, and it naturally produces more conservative, more deliberate, and financially better decisions across the board. Research on consumer financial decision-making consistently shows that people make significantly different choices about the same financial product when the total cost is presented prominently versus when only the monthly payment is highlighted. The difference in decision quality is not marginal. It is substantial, and it is why the consumer credit industry almost universally leads with monthly payments rather than total costs in their marketing and sales materials. Motel action this week. Before any significant financial decision, any purchase, any financing arrangement, any subscription commitment, calculate the total cost, not the monthly number, the total. How much does this actually cost in full over its entire life? Then make your decision from that number. The habit of always calculating total costs takes minutes to implement and is worth thousands of dollars annually in better financial decisions. From income focus to gap focus, shift 2. The number that actually predicts wealth. Most people believe the key variable in their financial life is how much they earn. The evidence says otherwise. The key variable is the gap between what they earn and what they spend, and what happens to that gap. Income focus is the dominant financial mindset in most cultures. Salaries are compared, raises are celebrated, career advancement is measured primarily in compensation terms. When people feel financially stuck, the first and most common instinct is that they need to earn more. And while income growth is genuinely valuable, and we will cover it in this video, income alone is a surprisingly poor predictor of wealth accumulation. The evidence for this is consistent and somewhat unsettling. Studies of wealth distribution consistently find people with high incomes who have minimal net worth because their lifestyle has expanded to absorb every income increase. And they find people with modest incomes who have accumulated significant wealth because they have maintained a meaningful gap between what they earn and what they spend and directed that gap consistently into investment. The income level is not the determining variable. The gap is gap-focused thinking changes the entire financial decision-making framework. Instead of asking, how do I earn more? Though that remains important, the primary question becomes, how do I maximize the gap between what I earn and what I spend? This immediately focuses attention on both sides of the equation simultaneously. Opportunities to grow income and opportunities to reduce unnecessary spending. It makes the savings rate, the percentage of income that goes into investment rather than consumption, the primary metric of financial health rather than income level. The gap-focused thinker evaluates every income increase differently, rather than immediately asking, what can I now afford that I couldn't before? The question becomes, how much of this increase can I capture into investment before my lifestyle adjusts? They evaluate every spending decision, not just for its immediate value, but for its effect on the gap. Does this spending reduce the gap meaningfully? Is the value it produces worth the gap reduction it creates? Two people each receive a salary increase of $10,000 per year. The income-focused thinker experiences this as expanded purchasing power Their lifestyle improves to reflect the new income level within a few months. The gap-focused thinker experiences it as an opportunity to expand the gap. They direct 70% of the increase into investment and allow 30% to improve their lifestyle. 3 years later, both have received the same raises. But the gap-focused thinker has added significantly more to their investment portfolio from those same raises, not because they earned more, but because they captured more of what they earned into wealth building rather than lifestyle expansion. The savings rate, the percentage of income directed into investment rather than consumption, is one of the strongest predictors of long-term wealth accumulation across income levels. People who maintain a savings rate above 30% of income consistently accumulate wealth faster than those with higher incomes but lower savings rates. The gap is the engine. Income is the fuel that feeds the engine. But without the engine, more fuel simply means more consumption rather than more progress. Vital action. This week, calculate your current savings rate, the percentage of your after-tax income that goes into savings and investment. Write it down. Then identify one specific way to increase it, either by redirecting a specific spending category or capturing a portion of your next income increase before your lifestyle adjusts. Even a 2 percentage point improvement in savings rate, sustained over years, has a meaningful impact on long-term wealth accumulation. From short-time horizon to long-time horizon, at Shift 3, the lens that changes. Every financial decision, the time horizon through which you evaluate financial decisions, may be the most powerful single variable in determining the quality of those decisions. Change the lens and the same decision looks completely different. Short-time horizon, thinking evaluates financial decisions primarily by their immediate impact. How does this affect my finances this month? How does this affect my lifestyle right now? Can I afford this today? This month? These are the questions of a short-time horizon, and they are the questions most people ask most of the time because the immediate is concrete and the future is abstract. But financial outcomes are primarily determined by decisions made and sustained over long time periods. The investment that looks modest today compounds into something significant over 20 years. The debt that feels manageable monthly costs a fortune over the decade it takes to pay off on minimum payments. The savings rate that feels constraining today produces financial freedom in 15 years. Every one of these realities is invisible through a short-term lens and obvious through a long-term one. Long-time horizon thinking does not mean ignoring the present or making every financial decision feel like a 20-year calculation. It means extending the natural frame of reference for significant financial decisions from months to years and decades. Before a major purchase, the question is not just, can I afford this now? But what does this cost me in terms of compound investment return foregone over the next 15 years? Before a career decision, the question is not just, does this pay more now, but which path produces more financial and professional value over the next decade? Before a debt decision, the question is not just, can I service this, but what does the total interest cost of this obligation mean for my financial trajectory over its full term? Imagine viewing a major financial decision through a 5-year lens versus a 20-year lens. A decision to buy an expensive car on finance looks manageable through a 5-year lens. The monthly payments are affordable, the car is desirable, the immediate quality of life improvement is real. Through a 20-year lens, the picture changes dramatically. The total cost of the car, including interest, the depreciation, the investment return that the capital used for the deposit and payments could have produced over 20 years. The lifestyle adjustment required. The same decision seen through the longer lens often looks very different, not always worse, but always more honestly. Research on financial decision quality consistently shows that prompting people to consider the long-term implications of financial choices, even briefly, even through a simple question about future impact, significantly improves the quality of those decisions. The long-term lens does not require complex calculations. It requires only the habit of extending the question from right now to over time, before making significant financial commitments. Action this week. Take any significant financial decision you are currently considering, a purchase, an investment, a career choice, and deliberately evaluate it through a 10-year lens. Ask, what does this decision look like 10 years from now? Not 10 months. What are the compound implications? What would be different about my financial position if I made this decision versus the alternative? Write down what the longer view reveals. From scarcity thinking to abundance thinking, Shift 4, the operating premise that changes behavior. Two people look at the same financial opportunity. One sees the risk of losing what they have. The other sees the potential of gaining what they want. Same opportunity, completely different cognitive and emotional responses. That difference in operating premise determines what they do next. Scarcity thinking is the mental model that operates from the premise that resources are fundamentally limited, that wealth is finite, that there is only so much to go around, that someone else's financial success represents a smaller share available for you. This mental model produces specific, identifiable, financially damaging behaviors. Risk avoidance that prevents investment. Resentment of others' success that prevents learning from it. Hoarding of resources in safe but low-return forms that feel protective. Defensiveness about current financial position that prevents honest assessment of what needs to change. Abundance thinking operates from a different premise, that value can be created, not just redistributed. That wealth is not a fixed pie divided between winners and losers, but something that expands as human ingenuity, productivity, and exchange expand. That other people's success is a model and a teacher rather than a threat. That risk is manageable through diversification, research, and prudent structure, and that avoiding it entirely produces its own costly outcomes. This is not naive optimism or wishful thinking. It is a different and arguably more accurate operating model for a modern economy. The evidence that wealth can be created through productive activity, investment, and innovation, rather than merely redistributed, is overwhelming. And operating from that premise produces behaviors that are consistently more financially productive than those produced by the scarcity premise. The abundance thinker invests in the market because they believe in the long-term productive capacity of human enterprise. They negotiate for higher compensation because they believe their contribution creates value worth being paid for. They take calculated risks because they believe the expected return justifies the managed downside. They celebrate others' financial success because they see it as evidence of what is possible rather than as a diminishment of what is available to them. Two colleagues learn about an investment opportunity, a broadly diversified index fund that their employer has added to the retirement plan. The scarcity thinker feels anxiety about putting money into something that could decline. They keep their retirement savings in a stable, low-return money market fund, safe, familiar, not threatening to what they already have. The abundance thinker sees the long-term historical evidence of equity market returns and puts their retirement savings into the index fund. Over 20 years, the difference in outcomes from this single decision compounds into a genuinely large gap, not from dramatically different financial situations, but from a different operating premise about whether engaging with risk-adjusted opportunity is reasonable or threatening. Action this week: identify one financial decision you have been avoiding, because the scarcity response, the risk of losing what you have, has been louder than the abundance response, the potential of gaining more. Ask yourself whether that avoidance has served you financially. Then ask what a genuinely abundance-oriented evaluation of the same situation would lead you to do. You do not have to act immediately, but see the decision from both premises and notice how different it looks. From spending identity to ownership, identity shift 5. The identity shift that changes everything. One of the most powerful and least discussed drivers of financial behavior is identity. The story a person carries about who they are financially and what that means about the choices available to them. A spending identity is the financial self-concept organized around consumption. What you own, what you can afford, what your lifestyle reflects about your status and success. People with a spending identity feel their financial well-being through the quality of their possessions, their experiences, and their ability to purchase what they want. Their financial success is measured by consumption capacity, by what they can buy, and their financial anxiety centers on the threat to that consumption capacity. An ownership identity is the financial self-concept organized around assets. What you own that works for you, that produces returns, generates income, or appreciates in value. People with an ownership identity feel their financial well-being through the growth of their asset base, their investment portfolio, their business equity, their property holdings, their stake in productive enterprises. Their financial success is measured by ownership accumulation and their financial anxiety centers on threats to the productive capacity of what they own. The practical difference between these two identities is immense and pervasive. A person with a spending identity experiences a windfall, a bonus, a tax refund, and unexpected income as primarily an opportunity to consume. They feel the pull toward the purchase, the experience, the lifestyle upgrade. A person with an ownership identity experiences the same windfall, primarily as an opportunity to add to their asset base. Same money. Profoundly different instinctive response, because the instinct comes from a different sense of financial self. The shift from spending identity to ownership identity does not happen instantly. It is not achieved by willpower or by making spending feel wrong. It happens by deliberately building the ownership side of your financial life until it becomes the primary source of financial identity and financial well-being. When you have meaningful investments that you track and care about, when you have a growing asset base that you feel ownership of and pride in, when you begin to think of yourself primarily as an investor and an owner, rather than primarily as a consumer, the pull of the spending identity weakens naturally, not because you have suppressed it, because something more compelling has replaced it. Think about the internal experience of two people who each receive an unexpected $2,000 tax refund. The first person, operating from a spending identity, immediately feels a pull toward a specific purchase. They have been wanting the television, the holiday, the wardrobe upgrade. The money feels like permission to consume. The second person, operating from an ownership identity, immediately thinks about what asset this could become, what investment it could join, what debt it could eliminate, what productive ownership it could add to. The money feels like a contribution to something growing. Same amount. The identity determines where the money goes, and where it goes determines what it becomes. Studies on the relationship between financial identity and financial outcomes consistently show that people who describe themselves primarily as investors and wealth builders, regardless of their current wealth level, make significantly more wealth-building financial decisions than those who describe themselves primarily in consumption terms. The identity precedes and shapes the behavior. Building the ownership identity through deliberate investment and deliberate attention to growing asset ownership produces the behavior that builds the wealth that reinforces the identity. Model action. This week, deliberately reframe how you describe your financial life to yourself, not necessarily to others. Instead of thinking about what you can afford to buy, practice thinking about what you can afford to own, what assets you can add to your portfolio, what investments you can make, what ownership you can build. Spend 5 minutes reviewing your investment account with the same attention and ownership pride you might give to a possession you care about. Build the identity by engaging with the reality it describes. From reactive decisions to pre-committed system shift 6. Why systems beat willpower. Every single time here is a financial truth that most personal finance content avoids because it challenges the popular narrative of discipline and willpower. The people who make consistently good financial decisions are not necessarily more disciplined than those who do not. They have better systems. Reactive financial decision-making relies on willpower at the moment of decision. Every month, the decision is made again whether to save, whether to invest, whether to spend on discretionary items, or redirect that money toward financial goals. And at the moment of decision, there are always immediate pressures competing for that money, current wants, current stresses, current social contexts, current emotional states. Willpower battles all of these at every decision point. And willpower loses more often than most people would like to admit, because it is a finite resource that depletes with use. Pre-committed systems remove the willpower requirement from financial behavior by making the good financial decision automatic. The investment contribution is automatic. It leaves the account on payday without requiring any decision in the moment. The emergency fund contribution is automatic. The debt payment is scheduled. The budget allocations are preset. The decision was made once in a calm, deliberate moment with full information, and it executes repeatedly without requiring a fresh decision every time. This shift from reactive to systematic is one of the most practically impactful changes available in personal finance. Not because it requires more discipline, it actually requires less, but because it removes the financial decision from the emotional, pressured context of the moment and places it in the rational, planned context of a deliberate system. The system makes the decision. All you need to do is not override it. Wealthy people, people who have built financial independence over time, almost universally describe financial systems that operate independently of their moment-to-moment financial mood. Automatic investment contributions, automatic debt payments, pre-allocated budget categories, scheduled reviews rather than reactive monitoring. These systems are not sophisticated. They are simple, consistent, and extraordinarily effective because they transfer financial decision-making from the unreliable moment to the reliable structure. Consider two people with identical savings goals and identical incomes. The first relies on saving whatever is left over at the end of the month after all expenses and spending. Some months they manage to save something. Most months everything is spent and there is nothing left to save. The second person sets up an automatic transfer on payday that moves a fixed amount to a savings and investment account before any spending occurs. Their spending adjusts to whatever remains. Every single month, without exception and without requiring any decision or willpower, money goes toward their financial goals. 12 months later, the second person has saved consistently. The first person has saved occasionally same income. The system produced the consistent result that willpower could not. Action this week. Identify the one financial behavior you know you should be doing consistently, but are not: investing, saving, paying extra on debt, reviewing your budget. Then build a system around it that removes the recurring decision requirement. Set up the automatic transfer. Schedule the calendar reminder. Create the pre-commitment that makes the good behavior automatic rather than voluntary. Systems beat willpower every time. Build the system. From avoiding difficult money conversations to seeking them to Shift 7. The uncomfortable conversations that build wealth there is a specific set of financial conversations that most people actively avoid, and that avoidance has a direct, measurable, consistent financial cost. Salary negotiation conversations. Conversations with financial advisors about honestly evaluating whether current investment strategies are optimal. Conversations with partners about genuine alignment on financial goals and spending priorities. Conversations with lenders about whether current terms can be improved. Conversations with themselves about whether their financial plan is actually working, or whether they are continuing an approach that has not produced the results they needed, because changing it requires confronting the fact that it was wrong. Most people avoid these conversations for understandable reasons. They are uncomfortable. They involve potential rejection, conflict, and the vulnerability of exposing your financial situation to scrutiny. Asking for a raise risks being told no, and that no carries a sting that feels disproportionate to the potential gain, even when the potential gain is enormous. Having an honest conversation with a partner about financial misalignment risks conflict. Evaluating whether your financial plan is working requires the humility to admit it might not be. Wealthy people who have built financial independence, have developed a different relationship with these conversations, not because they find them comfortable. Most of them do not, but because they have learned that the financial cost of avoiding them consistently exceeds the emotional cost of having them. The raise they do not ask for costs them thousands of dollars per year indefinitely. The suboptimal investment strategy they do not honestly evaluate costs them returns that compound for decades. The financial misalignment they do not discuss with their partner produces decisions that work against a shared financial future. The shift here is from treating uncomfortable financial conversations as things to be avoided when possible, to treating them as among the most financially productive activities available. Every salary negotiation conversation, regardless of outcome, provides information. Every honest financial review, however uncomfortable, produces clarity. Every difficult financial conversation with a partner, however fraught, builds the shared understanding that makes unified financial progress possible. Think about two people at the same career level and tenure who each feel they are underpaid relative to their contribution and market value. The first person avoids the conversation, the fear of a negative response, the discomfort of self-advocacy, the uncertainty of how it will be received feels too large. They continue at their current salary indefinitely. The second person prepares thoroughly, researches market rates, documents their contribution, frames the conversation professionally, and has the negotiation conversation. Even if the first attempt produces only a partial improvement, the pattern of having these conversations consistently over a career produces a meaningfully different income trajectory. The conversation itself is not the win. The willingness to have it repeatedly without excessive fear of the discomfort it involves is Motel action this week. Identify one financial conversation you have been avoiding with an employer, a financial provider, a partner, or with yourself through an honest financial review. Schedule it for this week. Prepare what you need to prepare, then have it. The discomfort is temporary. The financial consequences of continuing to avoid it are permanent and compounding. From money as emotion to money as tool. Stop. Shift 8, the deepest and most liberating shift. The relationship most people have with money is fundamentally emotional. Money makes them anxious when there is not enough of it. It makes them happy when there is more of it. It makes them feel guilty when they spend it on things they feel they should not. It makes them feel successful when they spend it on things that signal status. It makes them feel powerful when they can afford things and powerless when they cannot. Money, for most people, is a primary generator of their emotional experience of life, constantly, pervasively, exhaustingly present in how they feel about themselves and their circumstances. This is not a character flaw or a sign of poor values. It is the natural result of money being genuinely important, of it being the medium through which safety, security, opportunity, and status are accessed in modern life. Of course, it carries emotional weight. It is the currency of a significant portion of what humans need and want. But the emotional relationship with money, while understandable, is one of the most consistent sources of poor financial decisions. Emotional responses to market volatility produce panic selling at market bottoms. Emotional responses to social comparison produce lifestyle spending that serves status rather than genuine well-being. Emotional responses to financial anxiety produce either paralytic risk avoidance or desperate risk-taking, neither of which produces good long-term outcomes. Emotional attachment to specific financial positions, a stock that has declined, a business idea that is not working, a financial decision that was wrong, produces sunk cost, thinking that costs more the longer it continues. The shift from money as emotion to money as tool does not mean becoming cold, detached, or indifferent to your financial life. It means developing a relationship with money that is primarily functional rather than primarily emotional. Money is a medium, a highly useful one, for converting effort, expertise, and time into access to the things that genuinely matter. It is a tool for creating security, enabling opportunity, funding the experiences and relationships that constitute a good life. When it is performing this function well, when it is growing, when it is directed toward what genuinely matters, the functional relationship with it produces consistent, calm, effective financial management. The practical markers of this shift are visible in specific financial behaviors. The tool thinker reviews their investment portfolio without the emotional volatility that market fluctuations would produce in someone whose sense of well-being is tied to the portfolio's daily value. They make major financial decisions from deliberate analysis rather than from emotional responses to immediate circumstances. They spend money on what they genuinely value without guilt, and avoid spending on what they do not value without deprivation, because the allocation is based on functional priorities rather than emotional impulses. Consider two investors during a significant market decline, say a 30% drop over several months. The emotionally attached investor feels the decline as a direct threat to their security and well-being. The portfolio is worth less. That feels bad. That bad feeling produces the impulse to sell, to stop the pain, to get back to safety, to prevent further loss. And many emotionally attached investors act on that impulse, crystallizing losses at precisely the worst moment. The tool-oriented investor sees the same decline differently. Their portfolio is worth less today. The tool is temporarily less powerful than it was. But the tool's long-term function, producing compound returns through diversified ownership of productive assets, has not changed. They do not sell. In many cases, they see the lower prices as an opportunity to buy more of the tool at a discount. Same decline. Completely different response, because one investor's sense of well-being is tied to the portfolio's daily value and one's is not. Quantitative studies of individual investor behavior consistently show that the average individual investor significantly underperforms the market indices they invest in, not because they make bad initial investment choices, but because of the emotional decisions they make after. They buy after markets rise when optimism is high. They sell after markets fall when fear is dominant. This pattern, buying high and selling low, is the direct financial consequence of making investment decisions from an emotional relationship with money rather than a functional one. The gap between market returns and average investor returns is a measure of what emotional money management costs. Building the tool relationship with money is a practice rather than an instant switch. It develops through deliberate financial education, understanding what money actually is and how it actually works. Through the experience of watching systematic financial decisions produce consistent results over time. And through the gradual reduction of financial anxiety as the financial system becomes more robust, more resilient, and less dependent on any single decision going perfectly. Action this week. Notice once, just once, an emotional response to a money situation. Could be anxiety when checking your balance, guilt about a purchase, discomfort when thinking about your debt, envy when seeing someone else's apparent financial situation. Notice the emotion without acting on it. Then ask, if I were treating money purely as a tool right now, what would the rational, functional response to this situation be? You do not need to eliminate the emotion. Just practice separating the observation of the emotion from the financial decision it might otherwise drive. Final message: 8 shifts. 8 specific, learnable, adoptable differences in how people who build wealth think about money compared to those who stay stuck, regardless of income level, background, or circumstances. From monthly payment thinking to total cost thinking, seeing every financial commitment for what it fully costs rather than what it costs this month. From income focus to gap focus, measuring financial health by the gap between earning and spending rather than by earning alone. From short-time horizon to long-time horizon, evaluating significant financial decisions over years and decades rather than months. From scarcity thinking to abundance thinking, operating from the premise that value can be created rather than only redistributed. From spending identity to ownership identity, building a financial self-concept around what you own and what grows rather than what you consume. From reactive decisions to pre-committed systems, designing financial behavior to be automatic rather than dependent on moment-to-moment willpower. From avoiding difficult money conversations to seeking them, treating uncomfortable financial discussions as among the most financially productive activities available. And from money as emotion to money as tool, developing a functional relationship with money that produces consistent, calm, effective financial management rather than volatility-driven decision-making. I want to be direct about one thing before we close. These 8 shifts are not a checklist that you complete once and consider done. They are orientations, directions of travel, that become more fully developed through practice, through experience, and through the gradual accumulation of evidence that they produce better outcomes. Nobody embodies all 8 perfectly. The goal is not perfection, it is direction. Pick the one that felt most immediately relevant to your current financial life. The one where the contrast between the two sides hit closest to your current reality. Start there. Apply it deliberately to the financial decisions you face this week. Notice what changes, then build from that foundation. The gap between people who build wealth and those who stay stuck is not primarily a gap in resources. It is a gap in thinking. And thinking is the one element of financial life that is entirely within your control, today, regardless of where you are starting from. If this video gave you a clearer, more honest picture of what wealthy thinking actually looks like, please share it. The most valuable financial gift you can give someone is a mirror that shows them clearly where they are and what direction leads somewhere better. Subscribe to our Financial Edge for a new video every single week. And leave a comment below. Which of the 8 shifts challenged you most? Drop the number. I read every single reply, and I genuinely want to know. See you in the next one.